We would need to access it when the house is quiet. My father keeps the cellar key on a chain inside his coat pocket, but the second lock, the inner door, opens with a mechanism behind one of the wall torches. I saw him press it once when I was a child. I was hiding behind the coal bin. He didn't know I was there. Ezekiel thought for a long moment. What nights is the house empty? When do they meet? Catherine closed the box gently. The brethren gather on the first Friday of every month. They arrive before dusk and leave after midnight. But the ledger is not kept with them during rituals. It stays locked in the hidden room. Father always retrieves it afterward, never during. That is when he is most distracted. The next gathering is May 3rd, Ezekiel said quietly. Catherine nodded. Which gives us 9 days. Enough time for me to regain more strength. Enough time for you to learn the layout of the cellar. Judith knows some of it. She won't tell you directly. Fear controls her, but she will answer questions if they sound harmless. He considered this. And your father? Will he suspect you're improving too quickly? A thin smile. He already suspects. He watches me breathe, but he believes the opium still controls me. He believes I am docile. He wants to believe it. That is his weakness. The brethren rely on fear, not observation. Ezekiel stepped closer. Miss Catherine, when the time comes, you must be ready for what we may find in that cellar. Her eyes shifted toward the window again. The moonlight caught her expression, haunted, remembering. There is nothing in that cellar worse than what has already been done to me. I am ready. The following days passed with deliberate routine. Catherine walked farther each morning. Downstairs, across the back hall, even outside beneath the magnolia trees. House servants glanced away, confused, frightened by her sudden lucidity. Ezekiel guided her through breathing exercises, helped her reduce the last of the laudanum until she no longer needed it at all. Her appetite returned, though he kept her meals small and balanced. At night, after the household slept, they spoke in low whispers about the plan. Judith unknowingly helped. During laundry, she mentioned that the cellar steps creaked, except for the third one from the top. In the kitchen, she murmured that the torches were replaced every season because the old ones leaked sap. Every detail was valuable. May 2nd arrived heavy with storm clouds. Thunder rolled over the rice fields like distant cannon fire. Silas spent most of the day in his study, pacing, reading, drinking. He snapped at the servants. He demanded Catherine remain in her room, claiming the humidity would worsen her nerves. She obeyed, on the surface. After midnight, when the storm calmed, Ezekiel slipped from his cabin and crossed the yard toward the main house. Catherine opened her door before he could knock. "He is asleep," she whispered. "I heard him snoring half an hour ago. The key is in his coat." Ezekiel nodded. "Then we begin." They moved silently through the corridor, past portraits of Rutland ancestors whose painted eyes seemed to follow them. Catherine led him to the study door. She paused, listening. Silas breathed heavily on the other side. Ezekiel eased the door open. Silas slumped in his chair, empty glass on the desk, bottle half full beside him. His coat hung on the back of the chair. Catherine stayed in the doorway, refusing to step inside the room she feared most. Ezekiel moved quickly, searching the coat pockets. His fingers touched cold metal, the cellar key. He closed his hand around it. Suddenly Silas stirred. Catherine froze. Ezekiel held still until the older man exhaled again into sleep. They stepped out and closed the door softly. "Now," Catherine whispered. They descended the staircase, each step a drumbeat. The air grew colder as they approached the cellar door. Catherine's breath was steady. Ezekiel unlocked the heavy iron lock. The hinges groaned. They slipped inside. The cellar was exactly as Catherine had described. Long stone walls, a dirt floor smoothed by decades of footsteps, hooks embedded in beams, stains that time had refused to erase. Torches in metal brackets flickered as if remembering screams. Catherine avoided looking at the center of the chamber. "The hidden room is behind the second torch on the left," she whispered. Ezekiel tested the torches one by one until he felt a slight give beneath the rusted metal. He pushed. A low click echoed. A narrow panel shifted open, revealing darkness deeper than the cellar itself. Catherine stepped back, trembling, not from weakness but fury. They entered. Inside was a small room lined with shelves, jars, bundles of herbs, bone fragments, and on the central table, a thick, leather-bound book locked shut with two metal clasps. The ledger. Catherine inhaled sharply. That's it. Every name, every crime, every lie they've ever buried. Ezekiel lifted it, heavy, real, dangerous. Then a floorboard above them creaked. Both froze. Another creak. Then footsteps. Slow, steady, purposeful. Catherine's face went white. Someone is awake. Ezekiel extinguished the nearest torch. The cellar sank into shadows. Another step, then another, and a voice. Silas Rutledge. "Catherine! Ezekiel!" The footsteps grew louder, approaching the stairs. Catherine whispered, barely audible, "He knows." Ezekiel grabbed her hand. "We run, now." And together they slipped into the darkness as the cellar door opened. Ezekiel moved west through the Carolina backcountry, carrying nothing but the stolen ledger pages that held his family's names and the memory of those who had suffered under men like Silas Rutledge. The frontier was rough, a place where law was sparse and survival demanded more than courage. He avoided towns, trusting the forests and the hidden routes used by enslaved people escaping bondage. At night, he slept in hollow trees, in caves, in abandoned cabins. He learned to read the signs of hunters and plantation patrols, to listen for the distant sound of hooves, the faint whistle that might signal danger. Months passed. Word of Cypress Grove's destruction traveled slowly, whispered among freedmen, enslaved people, and the scattered few who dared to question the official story. Some thought Catherine had perished in the fire. Some told stories of a mysterious man, black as the night, who struck swiftly and vanished. Ezekiel became a ghost in those tales, a shadow of vengeance and justice, neither fully living in the world of the free nor in the one he had escaped. In Philadelphia, Catherine learned to survive in a city that was itself divided by race and class. She lived under a new name, carefully constructed, her wealth replaced by the stipend her father's enemies grudgingly provided. She took work as a teacher, using the skills she had honed under tutors, teaching children who reminded her of Benjamin and Ruth, teaching the powerless that knowledge was its own kind of power. Every night she coded her journals with new stories of Cypress Grove, of the Brethren, of Ezekiel's heroism. Letters she would never send were folded into the false bottoms of boxes, hidden behind walls or buried beneath floorboards in attics. Over the years, Ezekiel created networks of his own. He found other enslaved people who had escaped, who had seen horrors they could not forget. Together, they helped people disappear, cross rivers, reach northern cities, and find freedom. They forged safe houses, developed secret signals, and established routes that became invisible veins in the South, lifelines for those desperate enough to run. Ezekiel never forgot Cypress Grove. He kept the ledger pages hidden close to his heart, a constant reminder of why he fought, of what could happen if power went unchecked. By the 1850s, the stories of Cypress Grove had become legend. Children whispered about the fire that consumed the powerful and the mysterious man who freed the helpless. Some claimed the journal still existed, encoded and buried in secret locations, waiting for the day someone brave enough would rediscover the truth. Scholars decades later would stumble upon fragments of rumors, references in letters and court documents, but none could piece together the full story. It remained a tale passed in shadows, a warning. Cruelty has consequences, and even the most untouchable can fall. Ezekiel and Catherine never reunited, yet both understood their paths were bound by the same fire, the same vengeance, and the same relentless commitment to justice. The world around them continued to grow, divide, and change, but the lesson of Cypress Grove endured. Power built on cruelty is fragile. Secrets kept in darkness always leave traces, and those the world deems powerless may yet wield the greatest power of all, the power to remember, to act, and to ensure that evil does not go unchallenged. The year was 1863. The South was aflame with war, and Union troops had advanced into the low country of South Carolina. Cypress Grove's land had long since been sold, its ruins replaced with modest farmland and a small homestead. Yet beneath the soil, the remnants of its past still lingered. Tunnels, hidden chambers, and whispers of atrocities long buried. Ezekiel had moved further west, near the frontier of Mississippi, where communities of escaped and freed people had formed hidden networks. He had become a legend in his own time, a figure who struck fear into those who trafficked in cruelty. Yet the past was never far from him. In letters coded in ways only he and Catherine could decipher, he exchanged news of threats, of surviving members of the Brethren's network who had escaped the fire at Cypress Grove. Some had fled north, blending into cities like New Orleans, Charleston, and Savannah. Others had assumed new identities on distant plantations. Their power remained, a shadow that threatened the fragile gains of freedom. Meanwhile, Catherine lived in Philadelphia under a carefully constructed identity, working as a teacher in a school for free black children. She had changed her appearance, her name, and even her accent, yet every day she carried the memory of Cypress Grove, of the ledger, and of Ezekiel's courage. She trained herself in writing coded histories, in preserving what could never be told openly, so that even if she died, the truth could someday rise. Union forces had taken Cypress Grove during their campaigns. Bones were unearthed in the swamps nearby, shallow graves of those who had been sacrificed. Soldiers found remnants of tunnels and jars, but the coded journals were gone. They had vanished long before, just as Catherine had predicted. Yet in scattered whispers among soldiers and freed people, the story persisted. A fire that had consumed the powerful, a black man who had challenged men who thought themselves untouchable, a woman who had survived and disappeared into the North. By 1865, the war ended. The South lay in ruins, its social order destroyed, and Reconstruction began. Ezekiel's network had expanded. He worked quietly, helping freed people find land, teaching them to read, protecting them from former masters who sought vengeance, and ensuring the crimes of men like Silas Rutledge were never repeated. The ledger pages he carried remained hidden, the names of his family a constant reminder of why his work mattered. He never sought recognition, never claimed reward. His vengeance had been personal, but his legacy became communal. Catherine's life was equally quiet, but no less consequential. In Philadelphia, she became part of an underground movement helping freed people and children escape exploitation, using the money she had inherited through her father's coerced compliance and the network of allies she had formed in secret. Her identity remained hidden, her true story unknown, yet she ensured the lessons of Cypress Grove endured through education and quiet advocacy. Decades passed. Ezekiel's work created safe havens stretching from the Mississippi frontier to Charleston. Catherine's lessons bore fruit in a new generation of leaders and teachers. Occasionally, rumors of surviving Brethren members circulated, but their power had waned. The fire of Cypress Grove had been both literal and symbolic, destroying not only their bodies but their aura of invincibility. In 1871, a historian digging through Philadelphia's archives stumbled upon a small coded journal tucked inside a wall of a forgotten building. Its pages were dense, written in a cipher only someone with prior knowledge could decode. The journal detailed Cypress Grove, the Brethren, the fire, and the heroics of a man named Ezekiel Cross and a woman named Catherine. Scholars would debate its authenticity for decades, some dismissing it as fanciful exaggeration. But those who knew, those who remembered, understood the truth, that justice had come in fire and shadow, and that even in a world built on cruelty, courage, and memory, could carve a path toward freedom. By the late 19th century, the names Ezekiel Cross and Catherine, known to some only as a teacher in Philadelphia, had become legend, whispered among communities that valued courage over submission. The story of Cypress Grove, buried by time and secrecy, became a moral compass for those who lived in its shadow. And somewhere, hidden from view, the ledger pages remained, a testament to horrors faced, evils confronted, and the unbroken promise of those who refused to forget. Even today, some say that on stormy nights near the old Cypress Grove land, when the wind moves through the oaks just right, you can hear echoes of the fire, the shouts of revolt, and the voices of those who once defied the seemingly invincible. Stories pass from one generation to the next, a reminder that the powerless often carry the greatest power, the power to remember, to resist, and to make history reckon with its sins. The story of Cypress Grove, Ezekiel Cross, and Catherine is not just a tale of revenge or violence. It is a testament to the enduring power of memory, courage, and moral choice. Even in the face of unimaginable cruelty, when systems of oppression seem absolute, the powerless can wield the greatest strength, the will to resist, the clarity to see truth, and the courage to act. Justice is not always served in courts or written in official records. Sometimes it lives in the stories of those who refuse to forget, who refuse to be silenced. Ezekiel and Catherine remind us that the fight against oppression often requires strategy, patience, and sacrifice, but it also shows that even the darkest legacies can be overturned when people dare to confront evil, not with fear, but with intelligence, resolve, and moral clarity. True power lies not in dominance or cruelty, but in the ability to protect, to remember, and to ensure that history honors the dignity of the oppressed. The fire at Cypress Grove burned more than a house. It burned the illusion of untouchable power. And though decades pass and time tries to bury the past, the courage of those who resist resonates forever, teaching that even in silence and shadow, justice finds a way. The story of Cypress Grove Plantation, of Catherine Rutledge and Ezekiel Cross, is not one of simple vengeance, nor is it a tale meant for the casual recounting of historical curiosity. It is a story that pierces the layers of human cruelty and resilience, exploring how power and corruption can dominate lives, and how, when confronted with the most oppressive structures, courage and ingenuity can rise from the most unexpected places. The events that transpired on that fateful night in June 1841 were not merely acts of rebellion. They were the culmination of decades of suffering, observation, and moral calculation. Catherine, who had lived under the weight of imposed madness, misdiagnosed hysteria, and systemic cruelty, demonstrated that true understanding of evil requires both a sharp mind and an unwavering heart. Ezekiel Cross, a man born into bondage, faced impossible choices, each more harrowing than the last, and yet he navigated them not merely through force, but with strategy, ethics, and a deep-seated desire for justice that never became indistinguishable from vengeance. In the weeks leading to the confrontation, the careful planning and meticulous attention to detail revealed a truth that transcends the specifics of one plantation or one cruel family. Evil, when institutionalized, becomes systemic, relying not just on overt violence but on complicity, secrecy, and the silencing of witnesses. The Brethren of the Harvest were more than just men of cruelty. They were architects of a network built to perpetuate oppression, a society in which fear and ritual reinforced dominance, and in which any deviation from their code was met with death. Ezekiel's ability to infiltrate their circle was not a mere stroke of luck. It was the result of understanding their structure, observing patterns, and exploiting their blind confidence. The story demonstrates how knowledge, patience, and strategic thinking can transform vulnerability into power, even against seemingly insurmountable odds. Catherine's role in this narrative is no less profound. Her survival, her careful accumulation of allies, and her meticulous planning for revenge and liberation show that resistance is as much an intellectual pursuit as it is a physical one. She turned her perceived weaknesses, her body, her mental health, the societal underestimation of her, into tools of power. In doing so, she shattered not just her father's illusions of control, but the very concept that the oppressed are powerless by default. Her actions remind us that the ability to remember, to witness, and to act on injustice is perhaps the most potent force against cruelty. By choosing to survive, to aid Ezekiel, and ultimately to destroy the brethren, she enacted a justice that the law could not provide, a justice rooted in accountability, courage, and moral clarity. The night of the fire at Cypress Grove was symbolic not only for its immediate outcomes, but for the broader truths it revealed. Fire, a destructive and transformative force, became the instrument by which the old order was definitively ended. It erased the physical evidence of atrocities, but more importantly, it represented the burning away of fear and helplessness that had permeated the lives of so many. The destruction of the ledger, while removing the opportunity for legal or historical justice in the immediate sense, also ensured that the cycle of secrecy and oppression would not simply continue under another guise. In that sense, the fire was not only retribution, but liberation, a reclaiming of agency by those who had been systematically denied it. Yet the story is not purely about destruction, it is about memory, moral choice, and the responsibilities that come with power. Ezekiel's careful preservation of the ledger entries concerning his family reflects a deeper truth: that history, no matter how painful, must be remembered. The act of keeping those memories, even in secret, ensures that the voices of the oppressed are not erased entirely. In a society that sought to suppress truth and elevate cruelty as virtue, memory itself became a revolutionary act. Catherine and Ezekiel understood that survival was not merely about living, but about ensuring that the lessons of suffering and resistance could endure beyond their own lifetimes. The aftermath of the fire, Catherine's flight north, Ezekiel's journey west, highlights another enduring theme. Freedom is both a personal and collective struggle. Their separation was heartbreaking, but it was a strategic necessity. The world they had disrupted remained hostile, and the remnants of the brethren, scattered across plantations and cities, could have pursued them relentlessly. By scattering and blending into new lives, they ensured not only their own survival, but the continued resistance against the systems that had enabled such atrocities. Their stories became legend among enslaved communities, whispered in quiet corners, passed from one generation to another. These stories, unofficial and unrecorded, were themselves acts of preservation, ensuring that the memory of oppression, resistance, and justice persisted in human consciousness, even when official histories sought to obscure it. This story also underscores the moral complexities inherent in fighting evil. Ezekiel's participation in the brethren's rituals, though brief and strategic, posed profound ethical dilemmas. The line between justice and complicity is not always clear, and the choices one makes under duress can carry consequences beyond immediate understanding. Yet the narrative demonstrates that sometimes moral courage is not the absence of difficult choices, but the ability to navigate them with foresight, strategic thinking, and a steadfast commitment to higher principles. Ezekiel did not allow the brethren to corrupt his morality entirely. He used their assumptions and their power against them, turning their system of dominance into the very instrument of their downfall. Ultimately, Cypress Grove stands as a reminder that cruelty, no matter how entrenched, is not invincible. The story is a meditation on the fragility of power when it is built on fear and oppression, and the resilience of the human spirit when fueled by justice, memory, and determination. It teaches that those deemed powerless, enslaved individuals, marginalized communities, or anyone oppressed by societal structures, possess a latent strength that can upend even the most entrenched systems. The narrative celebrates the intellect, bravery, and agency of those who refuse to be broken by circumstance, who use both mind and body to reclaim dignity and justice. Though time passes and history moves forward, the lessons of Cypress Grove endure. The fire that consumed the plantation was more than a physical event. It was a symbolic cleansing of corruption and cruelty, a definitive end to a cycle of terror, and a reaffirmation that evil, no matter how methodically maintained, will eventually face reckoning. The preservation of memory, the strategic use of knowledge, and the courage to act when most are paralyzed by fear are the ultimate instruments of justice. Catherine and Ezekiel's story illuminates the power of witness, the necessity of courage, and the moral imperative to resist oppression, no matter the personal cost. Even as official records erased the events, even as the physical evidence was destroyed, the truth lived on. It survived in the actions of those who carried the memory, in the stories whispered among those who had suffered, and in the legacy of courage that transcends time. Cypress Grove may have burned, but the impact of those who defied it and the principles they upheld remained indestructible. The story leaves us with a haunting but empowering truth: that power rooted in cruelty is temporary, that secrecy cannot withstand the persistence of memory, and that the human spirit, when determined, can reclaim justice even from the depths of unimaginable darkness. In the end, the tale of Ezekiel and Catherine is both a dark chronicle and a beacon of hope. It reminds us that evil is never absolute, that oppression always contains the seeds of resistance, and that the marginalized, the powerless, and the silenced possess a strength unmatched by privilege or cruelty. The legacy of Cypress Grove is a testament to the enduring human capacity for justice, strategy, courage, and moral clarity, a reminder that even in the darkest shadows, the light of conscience, memory, and righteous action cannot be extinguished. The story of Cypress Grove Plantation, of Catherine Rutledge and Ezekiel Cross, is not one of simple revenge. It is a tale that delves into the darkest corners of human cruelty and the resilience of those who refuse to be broken by it. It is a story of power, secrecy, and the extraordinary courage it takes to confront evil that has been carefully cultivated over decades. That night in June 1841, when the flames consumed the plantation and 13 men met their end, was the climax of years of observation, planning, and moral reckoning. Catherine, who had endured a lifetime of being misunderstood, misdiagnosed, and manipulated, showed that survival is not passive. It is deliberate, strategic, and, when necessary, fierce. Ezekiel Cross, born into bondage, faced choices that would have shattered most men. Yet he acted with precision, intelligence, and a deep sense of justice, proving that moral courage can thrive even in the most impossible circumstances. In the weeks before the confrontation, the meticulous planning revealed that evil is not just violent, it is systematic. The Brethren of the Harvest were not merely cruel men. They were architects of a network designed to protect and perpetuate oppression. Their rituals, their secrecy, and their ability to silence dissent made them formidable. Yet Ezekiel's infiltration proved that knowledge, patience, and keen observation could transform vulnerability into strength. His careful study of the plantation, its routines, and its people allowed him to turn their confidence and arrogance against them. Catherine's role was equally powerful. She took the tools of her oppression, her weight, her health and society's underestimation, and turned them into weapons. By gathering allies, creating a plan, and confronting her father with unflinching courage, she became a force of liberation. Her survival and decisive action proved that the powerless are not helpless, that those underestimated by society often hold the most potent forms of influence. Through her, the story reminds us that memory, witness, and courage are themselves forms of power. The fire at Cypress Grove was not just destruction, it was transformation. It destroyed evidence of atrocities, yes, but it also ended the cycle of terror that had haunted the plantation for decades. By burning the ledger and the chamber, Catherine and Ezekiel ensured that the brethren's secrets could no longer be used to perpetuate violence. It was an act of liberation, a reclamation of agency by those who had been denied it for generations. Yet even as the physical evidence was erased, the memory of what happened endured, preserved in the minds of those who had participated and witnessed, passed down in whispers and stories that refused to die. The aftermath of Cypress Grove emphasizes the complexities of moral action. Ezekiel's temporary participation in the brethren's rituals, his careful maneuvering, and his strategic decisions highlight that fighting evil often requires navigating impossible ethical landscapes. He did not allow their system to corrupt him, he used it to dismantle them from within. Catherine, too, balanced survival with vengeance, proving that strength is not only physical, but also mental and moral. Their choices demonstrate that courage often exists in the space between fear and action, and that justice may require patience, cunning, and personal sacrifice. Cypress Grove, burned and erased from public memory, left no trace of the horrors that had occurred within its walls. Yet the story endures because it exists in memory, in legend, and in the unrecorded histories of those who survived. The power of the oppressed, the courage of the silenced, and the moral clarity of those who acted against cruelty remain the true legacy. Evil, no matter how entrenched, is never absolute. The story teaches that memory, witness, and action are unstoppable forces, capable of toppling even the most fortified systems of oppression. Ultimately, the tale of Catherine and Ezekiel is both a dark chronicle and a testament to the human spirit. It reminds us that power built on cruelty is fragile, that the oppressed often carry the seeds of resistance, and that justice can take many forms beyond law and record. The fire at Cypress Grove destroyed the physical remnants of horror, but it could not destroy the courage, ingenuity, and moral strength that drove the two to act. Their story endures as a symbol of the potential for resistance, for justice, and for reclaiming one's agency in the face of overwhelming evil. History may try to erase what happened, but truth has a way of surviving. It lives in memory, in stories told in secret, and in the courage of those who refuse to forget. Cypress Grove Plantation burned, but the legacy of those who rose against cruelty remains indestructible. The story of Catherine and Ezekiel Cross reminds us that even in the darkest shadows, the human spirit holds the most dangerous and enduring power. The power to witness, to remember, and to act. I will give you resources to destroy him, money, information, whatever you need to make him suffer as you have suffered. Silas's offer hung in the air, obscene in its calculation. Join the men who destroyed his family to take revenge on another monster, and if you refuse, both you and Catherine die tonight. Your bodies disappear into the swamp. No one will ever know. The papers Catherine was copying, burned. Her journals, destroyed. Everything continues as it always has. But if you accept, you live. Catherine lives. You get your revenge. All it costs is your soul. Ezekiel looked at Catherine. Her face was pale, but she gave him the faintest shake of her head. Do not do it. Whatever happens, do not become them. But Ezekiel's mind raced. He thought of getting inside their organization, gathering evidence, buying time. What happens to her if he refuses? She returns to her room, resumes her medications, forgets what she has seen. No, she dies with him. Catherine's voice cut across the chamber. I will not forget again. I will not be silenced. Kill me if you must, Father, but I will not pretend I do not know what you are. Silas's expression hardened. Then you have made your choice. Wait, Ezekiel said quickly. I accept, but on one condition. Catherine goes free, not back to her room, free. Leave South Carolina, give her money to start over. If you do that, I will join you. Several Brethren members shook their heads, but Judge Pelham spoke. The boy makes a point. The girl is already broken. Even if she spoke, who would believe her? But a man willing to join us, to be complicit, that is valuable. It proves our power extends even to those who hate us. Silas considered. Finally he nodded. Very well. Catherine will be sent north, Philadelphia. She will be given a new identity, a stipend to live on. She can never return. She will be dead to everyone here. Catherine stared at Ezekiel. No, I will not leave you to... She goes free, Ezekiel interrupted. I join you, then we have a bargain. Silas turned to the others. Catherine leaves tomorrow. Ezekiel's initiation in 3 weeks. Until then, he remains under watch. Attempt escape, and both die. Catherine left at dawn. Ezekiel watched the closed carriage roll down the drive. She had not been allowed to say goodbye, but in her eyes he saw understanding. She knew he had not truly surrendered. This was strategy, not defeat. The following 3 weeks were the longest of Ezekiel's life. Constant watch, menial tasks, observing routines, mapping weaknesses, learning the house, the overseers, the Brethren members. By night, alone in his cabin, he prepared. His initiation would demand complicity in evil. He wondered how far he was willing to go, what lines he would never cross, even for justice. On the night of June 2nd, Silas came to his cabin after midnight. Tomorrow you will become one of us. Not fully, never fully, but enough. The Brethren has existed for 43 years. We've never lost a member to exposure. Everyone is equally guilty. A man joins us and doors open, opportunities appear, enemies falter. We help each other maintain power. You killed my family to demonstrate commitment. Now you may prevent others from suffering the same fate. Use our network, advocate for better conditions, but understand this, participate and you are compromised. Accept our power and it will corrupt you. Succeed and you live. Fail and Catherine dies. Ezekiel nodded. Ice flooded his veins. Catherine was alive but in danger. His actions tomorrow would determine her fate. The gathering began at midnight, June 3rd. Ezekiel, bound, brought to the candle-lit cellar where 13 Brethren members waited. Silas stood at the altar's head. A young enslaved woman, terrified, was brought forward. This is your test. Take the knife, make the first cut. Prove your desire for revenge surpasses your moral objection. Refuse, you die. Accept, and you become one of us. Ezekiel raised the knife, but not toward the woman. Instead, he struck the nearest Brethren member, chaos erupting instantly. Shadows and screams filled the cellar. He freed the woman, shouting, "Run!" She scrambled for the stairs as Ezekiel fought. Privileged men, unpracticed in real violence, fell quickly. Above, Catherine emerged. She had never gone north. For 3 weeks, she had recruited allies among the enslaved people, preparing for this moment. When the young woman escaped the cellar, Catherine led 23 others, armed with tools, axes, and rage built over generations. They swept into the chamber, and there was no mercy. Silas, desperate, tried to use Catherine as a shield. "Kill me if you must," she said coldly. "It changes nothing. You have already lost." With a powerful strike, she broke free. Ezekiel confronted Silas, the culmination of years of pain and loss. "You took everything from me for nothing," he said. "No mercy. None would be given." By dawn, all 13 brethren members lay dead. Catherine and Ezekiel poured oil through the cellar, stacked wood and kindling, placed bodies carefully, and set the ledger and journals alight. They preserved the pages about Ezekiel's family, hiding them for memory and justice beyond reach. Flames consumed Cypress Grove Plantation, leaving nothing but ash. Catherine and Ezekiel separated, moving into new lives. Catherine north to Charleston, eventually Philadelphia. Ezekiel west, aiding others escaping slavery. They never saw each other again. The official story: a tragic accident, a fire that claimed 14 lives. No questions asked, no secrets revealed. Whispers persisted. Stories told late at night among enslaved communities. About a plantation that burned, about a woman and a man who struck down the powerful, about justice for the powerless. Some say a journal still exists, coded, waiting to be discovered decades later. The tale of Cypress Grove proves that power built on cruelty is never absolute, that the oppressed often hold the greatest power, the power of memory, of witness, and of refusing to forget. Justice may be hidden, imperfect, or delayed, but it comes, and those who endure never truly lose.